What's going on, Weekend Warriors? Fantasy football playoffs are here. For the first time in the last 4 years, yours truly will not be participating in the playoffs. It's a sad moment. Finished 8-6, had a successful season, but Pearson edged me for the last spot. Kudos to Pearson. The four members that have made the playoffs, the 1 seed is my brother Jake. The 2 seed is my brother-in-law Kevin. The 3 seed is Pearson. And the 4 seed is Zach. Each one of these teams has a little bit of a different story of how they made it in. We can go over that in a second here. A little sneak peek here for you. Wearing the Adam Thielen jersey. Hopefully he'll be back this week. The Vikings are one thing that I have left to cheer for this season. Them, and I am in another league with my brother trying to win our second championship in 3 leagues. So, that's why you spread some eggs. Make sure you have some other stuff to root for if you're not in it. But doesn't stop the commish from making a podcast. By the way, 4-1 in my predictions last week to round out the regular season at 44-26. Pretty damn good, if I should say so myself. Week 15 predictions, and then the finals, I only have 3 left. So I'm going to try and make them count. Going to try to run the table. Let's talk about the playoff teams here for a second. Jake, been at or near the top all season. Most points for in the league. Decent amount of points against. Finished the season on a 3-game winning streak. 10-4, but even if he had 9 wins, he'd still have enough points, like I said, to stay at the top spot. So well-deserved top spot for him. We'll get into the makeup of his team when we break down the matchup. But well-deserved top spot. In second, Kevin. I sniffed this out in week 6 or 7. He was 3-5. His team was on the rise. He's made some trades that were criticized, and they paid off. So kudos to Kev. Made some good moves. He finished the season on a 6-game win streak. Definitely not somebody you want to play in the playoffs. Second in the league in points for, and about 100 points against less than Jake, but well-deserved on the 2nd seed for Kevin. In the 3rd seed, Pearson, mentioned him earlier in the year. I thought that he was going to fade. He actually came on at the end of the season. He made some big pickups, spent a lot of fab money. Points for on the season, he's actually towards the bottom. He's got 1580. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in the standings, including Brett, Otley, Terry, and myself, more points for scored on the season, so he did benefit from a strength of schedule. He does have the least points against. That being said, different team for Pearson this year. He's had to deal with a little adversity on his team, some injuries, so I will say that his team looks a lot stronger now than it did in the beginning of the season, and he did finish the season on a 4-game win streak, so kudos to him. He won some close games, and let's see how he does in the playoffs. And then Zach, 8-6. He's been near the top of the standings all year. He's going through some injuries, some key injuries now that we'll talk about in the matchups, but definitely worthy of the 4 seed and a playoff berth here for Zach. So let's jump into the matchups. Not going to waste any time. Going to start with Jake and Zach. We're going to break this down position by position. So Lamar Jackson, he's probably the pick of the year. He's going to be on a lot of playoff teams around the fantasy football community. Jake, Ryan Tannehill. Matt Ryan's who he rode all year. Ryan Tannehill's hotter than anybody right now, and he could win people a lot of championships. So quarterback obviously edged to Zach, but I think Jake's streaming option of Tannehill is definitely a plus. Running backs, Jake's unmatched with Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette. Zach does have Aaron Jones, who's been very hit or miss. He's either in the single digits or in the 30s with a matchup at home against Chicago. Could go either way, truthfully. But he does have Connor in his lineup. He's been out. That should give him a boost, but there's no question that's a heavy advantage for Jake at the running back position. At the wide receiver position, I would say that Zach has the edge, except for some injuries and some disappointments. Julio Jones hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3. That's a correct stat. He's been banged up. Also, he hasn't eclipsed the 100-yard receiving game since week 8. So Julio, Not the guy you drafted him to be. He's the 12th wide receiver on the year. He's in San Francisco. Yikes. Bad matchup for Zach. And then he's got DJ Chark and Devontae Parker, two guys that are definitely banged up. Will they play? Not sure. Definitely banged up. So Zach leaking oil at the wide receiver position. Meanwhile, Jake, talent-wise, can't stack up. But Allen Robinson, he's been scoring touchdowns every week. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Jarvis Landry, been the 1A in Cleveland. And he's playing Arizona. Could you ask for a better matchup? And then Michael Gallup, he's kind of a wild card, against the Rams. Ramsey's probably on Cooper, so it's probably good news for Gallup. I'm going to give the wide receiver position a push. Zach's got the talent. Jake's got the matchup. Zach's got some injuries. A push, maybe a slight lean to Jake, which is surprising. Tight end, more of the same story. Mark Andrews, definitely a better tight end than Waller, I think, this year. I think Waller's more consistent, but Mark Andrews is a guy that could have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's banged up. So, a lot of injuries for Zach. Flex, Tyler Boyd, and Cortland Sutton. Talent-wise, got to love Sutton a little bit more. Boyd's playing New England. That's a lean to Jake. Kickers and defense can kind of always go either way, but the projections say Jake wins at 140 to 125. I got to back that. No upset special here. Zach leaking oil as he kind of limps into the playoffs with some injuries. He will be creative. He will put together a lineup that will compete. But I think that Jake will advance to the second round. Moving over to Balls Deep versus Rent Free and PP's Head. I mean, as much as I want to be in the playoffs, and trust me, I want to be there, this is a great matchup. Pearson versus Kev. These guys, I mean, if they're not calling each other ugly or one's calling somebody else, stupid, I mean, these guys are like arch rivals all of a sudden. Inside of the Fantasy Football League and outside of the Fantasy Football League. So I think we're going to try to get them on the next Rough and Rowdy to see who can kick the crap out of the other one. But look, Kev 6 in a row, working on 7. We talked about Pearson's team as well. Quarterback position, no question. Pearson has the edge with Drew Brees. Last week he benched him, and he scored 5 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown. So I don't think he's dumb enough to bench him again. He plays Monday night. Drew Brees, definitely over. Kev, who he has Garoppolo in right now. So I'm definitely leaning Brees. Running back position, Josh Jacobs for Kevin, Melvin Gordon as well for Pearson, Todd Gurley, Marlon Mack. Gurley has been coming on. They're leaning on him. They asked McVay. They asked him if why Gurley all of a sudden is getting more touches. He said he's not being stupid. He needs to give the ball to Todd. So I'm going to give that a wash. Josh Jacobs been pretty good all season. He has that shoulder injury, but I think he's going to play. Jacksonville's a dumpster fire. I think Jacobs and Gordon are 2 and 3 in this matchup. Gurley's 1, but I think Mack's 4 at New Orleans. Hasn't really done a whole lot. I'm going to call that a wash. Wide receivers, that's been Kev's story all year long. Chris Godwin, Michael Thomas, Julian Edelman. He's got Hill at flex. Just leave those 3 alone. Pearson's got Hopkins. He's been coming on as of late. He's the go-to guy. DJ Moore, the number 10 wide receiver on the year. Great pick by Pearson. And Emmanuel Sanders, on another guy on Pearson's bench last week, 33.5 points. I don't think he'll do that, but he's Garoppolo's go-to guy. So I know that Kev is hoping that Garoppolo throws it to Debo and not Emmanuel Sanders or George Kittle. George Kittle, that brings me. For wide receiver, I'm going to go Kev. Godwin, with no Michael Thomas against Detroit, should eat. Michael Thomas, another connection the other way. Pearson's quarterback, Kev's wide receiver. But Michael Thomas gets 100 and a touchdown every week. So I'm going to give Kevin the slight edge there at wide out. Tight end is obviously Pearson with Kittle over Greg Olsen, who is still working off a concussion. And then flex, Tyreek Hill in a flex is just ridiculous. Devontae Freeman at San Francisco, definitely Tyreek Hill. Kicker and defense, you say anything can happen. I do agree with that, but New England at Cincinnati, that's pretty damn good matchup. Pearson's rode them all year long. They're averaging 16 points. I think they get right around that average. So, listen, I'm going to go with Kev. I mean, you could be sexy and pick Pearson. Kev, on like I said, big winning streak. Pearson towards the middle of the pack, the bottom in points for. I think Kev has the better team, and I think he advances. So, balls deep goes down. Listen, I actually have one of the competitors with me. If you kind of notice the different background here, I'm going to bring in my brother Jake. Here he is, guys.
What's up,
Rocking
guys?
the Christian McCaffrey jersey here. So, I do have some questions for Jake. My first introduction to him is, last year he was in the finals. This year he's
Correct.
back in the playoffs.
I am.
How does it feel to be back in the playoffs in a competitive league like this?
Feels great. I mean, you had like 8 out of the 10 teams in the league actually competing for playoff spots like the last few weeks, so it's pretty tough. I'm glad I'm back.
Okay. You play Zach. I know that's probably not the guy you thought you were going to be playing. I mentioned Lamar Jackson, maybe pick of the year, where he got him. He's scary to go against, playing the Jets Thursday night. Who else on Zach's team scares you?
Well, I'm glad I'm getting Lamar out of the way Thursday night because I know he's going to get about 30, so I'm glad that's going to happen on Thursday instead of Monday or Sunday. But on Zach's team, of course I got to play James Conner the week he comes back, and he's playing a pretty bad Bills run defense, so I'm expecting him to do pretty well, which scares me a little bit.
Okay. So this player doesn't have to be from your team, but just for the group here.
He is on my team.
Okay. Well, last year, sneaky performance from C.J. Anderson. Jake picked him up. I think he ran for about 180 yards in a losing effort to Brett in the finals. But who is this guy this year that kind of stunk all season but now could be relevant?
Ryan Tannehill is the guy this year. He is going to bring me to the finals, and I'm going to win.
Okay. All right. So I like that call. He's a sexy streamer, and you and I have him in another league, so let's hope he does good. Back to Zach. Focused on Zach. Who wins and why? Do you agree with my assessment earlier?
All right, so obviously I'm going to pick myself. I mean, Zach's got a really good team, but just got to pick myself.
Okay. Do you think that it's going to take a big performance from Lamar on Thursday to really give him a shot?
I think so. Him and Andrews are going to have to connect at least once, I feel like.
Okay. All right. Well, do you have any words for Zach before I let you go here?
Zach, me and you have been at the top of the standings all year. The best man wins, man. It's going to be tough. We'll see.
All right, Zach. Before I let Jake go, I'm going to give him an unrehearsed question on the spot. Pearson and Kevin.
All right.
Who do you like?
I like Kevin that matchup. I mean, earlier in the week, Pearson sent me a video of him and Kev's faces photoshopped. So Pearson was like a defensive player and Kev was a quarterback, and it was Pearson sacking Kev.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty funny, but I still got to take Kev in that lineup. His receivers are just too good.
I'll tell you one thing. If Pearson loses to Kevin, Kevin is going to let him hear about that
Forever.
ever till the next year's draft, and Pearson's going to
After
hate
that.
it. And honestly, probably the other way, too. If Pearson beats Kev,
He's going to be sending that
interesting.
video to Kev a few more times. So.
All right, guys. Listen, had a special guest, one of the competitors. We'll see if he makes it to the finals. Good luck this week. Weekend Warriors, commish out.
Peace.